Welcome to another edition of Ian Cameron's Football Frenzy. Ian Cameron and Rob Vino, frequent guest on the show. We try to get him on once a month. Rob Vino back in the house here for another edition of the Football Frenzy. We'll try to get him on once in January, too, once we get into the NFL playoffs. Those are going to be coming fast and furious. Rob, it's a great time of year. This is obviously a football betting show, and what a time it is to be a football fan and bet. Or college football bowl games, morning, noon, and night. NFL down to the last 3 weeks of the regular season, first round of the college football playoff, Friday and Saturday. Lots of games, lots of opportunities, and it'll be fun to see it all play out.
Yeah, and in my case, Ian, I am such a traditionalist that bowl season, and people will argue March Madness, and I would put that at number 2, but this is my time of year. Like, I won't travel to see my family at this time of year. We travel at Thanksgiving. They're going to come to me at this time of year. I'm not leaving the office during this week. So I have a good time with bowl season. It's to me one of the best times of year. And as you mentioned, on top of it, what's going on in the NFL, it's always crazy down the stretch. We have playoffs to look forward to. So plenty of football opportunity as we, this weeknight bowl game stuff is, in my world, that's fantastic.
That is fantastic. Before we're going to talk mostly the first round games, but I'll just throw it. Is there anything in the Thursday bowl game or the two early Friday bowl games, which is Kennesaw, Western Michigan, Memphis, NC State, that appealed to you? I have small, but I'm keeping things pretty small right now, Rob, because of the volatility with the player transfer portal and players opting out, who's in, who's out. I was advantageously took advantage of the South Florida situation. Even then, I didn't know much about Quinn Hennikel, how he was going to play for Old Dominion yesterday. But I said, still, the idea of taking points with Old Dominion, with Byron Brown out, the Golish and the coaching staff now gone, that there was just way more instability with South Florida going into that game than Old Dominion. And it kind of played out that way. So nice to cash with that side yesterday. But is there anything in the bowl games the next 2 days other than the playoff that you appeal to you betting wise?
Well, these next two games that are up in bowl season, Ian, I guess you and I on the same wavelength. I'm very lightly involved tonight with Arkansas State plus the point. The money has come toward Missouri State. I have a love-hate relationship with it's mostly hate with Butch Jones as the head coach of Arkansas State. But the love part comes from Arkansas State coming from the depths of nowhere to cash my Arkansas State season over-under win ticket this year, over 5.5 wins. Very quickly, I give you one reason why. I just thought the line of scrimmage is owned by Arkansas State in this game. Missouri State, for what it's worth, third worst in the nation in both sacks allowed and tackles for loss allowed, and they're strictly a passing team with Jacob Clark at the helm. And Arkansas State, the anchor to that defensive unit is really their defensive front and their ability to put on pressure. Just to break that down real quick, first 7 games, they had 9 sacks. Last 5, they had 22. It's like they just turned on the switch and get after the quarterback. So we'll see. I'm with Arkansas State and I have a slight play with Western Michigan tomorrow morning over Kennesaw. Just on the premise, Ian, really quick, that the other side does not stop the run. Western Michigan thrives on the run. They don't do it really in bulk. So my idea was control the clock, which they're good at time of possession, run the football, keep the football away from Kennesaw. Western Michigan in a very, very, again, a close point spread here. I think they're laying 3 at this point in time.
What's been very interesting, and maybe it's a product of way more roster turnover and shuffling in bowl games than in years past, but usually you think in early bowl games, higher scoring bowl games, not so far. 3 bowl games, 3 unders this week. Since the Jacksonville State game, you had that stay under. You had the 2 games yesterday, both stay under, Old Dominion, South Florida. I had a piece of the over in Louisiana, Delaware. That didn't even get close. So I split because I had a piece of the Blue Hens, but I had the over as well. It didn't even get close to that. So something to just file away in the back of your mind, Rob, that normally we're used to higher scoring bowl games early. It hasn't been that way so far.
Yeah, Louisiana got to the 7-yard line at the end of that game, and I was praying for overtime because at 2020 we still could have gotten to the over, but unfortunately It didn't work out that way.
No, it did not. All right, let's get to the playoff games now. We got 4 college football playoff first round games. Alabama, Oklahoma to start Friday night with Oklahoma 1.5 point favorites, 41 the total. This will be the A team, if you will, Herb Street and Fowler. This is the game they're going to be doing for ABC. Boy, I go back and forth on this. Like I said, I don't have anything overly strong for the four first round games. I thought the first round did not treat me well, and I was much better betting the quarterfinals and the semifinals and the championship game last year. So it's probably a product of that. I'm taking it easy. I kind of lean Alabama. It's just because of the Kalen DeBoer effect. He's been in these playoff scenarios before with Washington, of course. What he did with Michael Penix Jr. there, and Ryan Grubb, who's, of course, back with him now. We've got that duo back at the coaching staff, leading Washington to a national championship appearance against Michigan that season. And Brent Venables, this is kind of rarefied air for him and his Oklahoma team as far as a head coaching standpoint is concerned. And I go back to that first matchup. The Ty Simpson pick six early, flipped the game, gave Oklahoma early momentum in that game in Tuscaloosa. And then from that point on, Alabama, they controlled spurts of that game. They heavily outgained and won the box score against Oklahoma as well. And it just seemed like they weren't able to cash in and capitalize enough in that game. And they moved the ball well enough on offense, and Simpson looked well, even though they fell short in that game. That being said, you look at down the stretch, they've obviously had running back issues with Jam Miller's health. They've had offensive line issues. There's been a noticeable decline, at least somewhat, in Ty Simpson's efficiency and accuracy, in the latter games of the season. And Oklahoma's defense on the road here in Norman on a Friday night is not going to be fun to deal with. However, there's problems on the Oklahoma offensive side to me that could worry me about their chances to not the second straight win over Alabama, really a third straight win over Alabama if you go back to last year when Oklahoma beat Alabama as well, because the O-line was definitely a little bit sketchy down the stretch, and they've had some injuries there. And John Mateer just was not throwing the football, as well late in the season as we saw early. And we've seen him, I think, a little bit more kind of like Lamar in the NFL. Lamar hasn't run the football as well for the Baltimore Ravens since his slew of injuries. I think we could say the same thing about John Mateer. He's just not been that burst that we see from him running the football hasn't been as much since his recent injury as well that he came back from. So I go back and forth, Rob, but especially now that we've seen some money move to Oklahoma, putting them as a slight favorite, I think I'm going to give Alabama a go here at plus 1.5. But this truly is a game where you can make a case for both teams in this spot. Rob, what do you think here for this first round Alabama-Oklahoma playoff matchup?
Well, I'm always of the opinion, Ian, that coaches love to fix what went wrong first time around. In Kalen DeBoer's case, it's the third time around against Oklahoma, right? And neither of the first two have they been very good offensively. And he's an offensive mind. And with Ryan Grubb as his OC again, as you mentioned, you have to believe that Alabama is going to come up with something offensively. They've had enough time to prep to be able to score. And they actually got to 21 the first time, right? So I think they'll be able to get to that number. On the Oklahoma side, I attribute a lot of John Mateer's ineffectiveness to the fact that the injury, he just looked like an injured quarterback. He still shows up with the guts that we expect him to show up with when it comes to running the football, but throwing the football, the inaccuracies. I think in that game, they made a couple of big plays, Oklahoma did, and they do have explosiveness on their side with the skill position. So they're always capable of making a big play. I took a small shot with this game getting over. As defensive minded as it was the first time around, they still got to 44. The Kalen DeBoer situation is interesting. The fact that Michigan took that charter plane during the Iron Bowl to come down and try and court Kalen DeBoer, his name still being bandied about in Michigan. I'd like to believe, and I do believe actually, that his mind is focused on his Alabama team. But outside distractions are a little bit of a concern there. I don't have a real good feel for the side. I don't think, Alabama in double revenge, I wouldn't want to bet against whatsoever. But I do think that they brought this total down so low at this point in time that I just have to take the small shot with over. Like I mentioned, the first game was no great shakes offensively by any stretch, and it still got to 44. So for me, It is a small play on the over here. We'll see how it goes. I'd expect Mateer to play a little bit better this time around. What I said about Alabama and DeBoer trying to fix what went wrong, the same things have gone wrong for Oklahoma. You got to get a little better play selection, mix up the game plan a little bit. I expect that out of both.
All right, let's go to Saturday. We've got Miami, Texas A&M. A&M 3-point favorites, 48 the total. Maybe I'm just anti-Mario Cristobal, but I know for the last couple weeks I've just been waiting and waiting and waiting. And please give me a 3. Please give me a 3 here on A&M at some point. We've got that 3 now, and at 3 or better, I like A&M. I do here in this situation. I think for Miami, look, they're in the playoff. We're not here to talk about whether they should be in or not, or Notre Dame should be in or not. They're in, and they did beat Notre Dame head-to-head, so I don't have as big a problem with it. The Notre Dame folks that are crying, hey, schedule a little tougher, a little stronger throughout the course of the season. But that's another story altogether. As far as this matchup, though, goes with these two teams, I just look at Miami and their schedule. And obviously early in the year, we saw them host Notre Dame. And obviously they got the job done there. They hosted South Florida, Florida as well early in the year. I keep going back to the fact that they have played 4 true road games all year. Florida State, SMU, which they lost, by the way, in overtime as a double-digit favorite. Virginia Tech, who just weren't very good this year, and obviously we saw them fire their head coach in season. And then Pittsburgh was impressive that game, 38-7. They rolled it up on the Pittsburgh Panthers in that game. But I think just from overall pedigree, quality of player on the other side, hard to compare Pittsburgh to Texas A&M. This is going to be Kyle Field on a Saturday afternoon, and an environment that Miami has just not played in environments quite like this all season long. Is Carson Beck going to be able to handle it? I think as far as his decision-making goes, that's where the issues were in some of his bigger games with Georgia before he got to Miami. And is that going to be something that he, protects the football, makes the right reads at all times? That's the big question. I think the counter to that, while you're concerned about Beck and, efficiency, accuracy for Miami, the A&M defense at times looked utterly dominant and at times looked like they were very susceptible. In the second half, all of a sudden, here's Texas just rolling it up all of a sudden in the second half and taking control of that game at the end of the regular season. They got way behind against a, lackluster South Carolina offense and had to rally from the dead, just to come back and win that game 31-30. So there are concerns about the A&M D as well. And then you counter that, the Miami defense has obviously been one of their strong suits this year, and Marcel Reed's gone through bouts of inconsistency. The run game's been a little bit more dicey with Le'Veon Moss's injury. He's been out, obviously, for a large part of the regular season. I went back and forth, but at 3, with the home field on their side, Miami, and especially their head coach, is probably going to have to prove it to me now that they are capable in a big-time matchup of getting the job done. This is kind of my total. Rob talked about how he waited for that total to drop in Oklahoma and now likes the over at the deflated number. I'm kind of getting there with this total for over at 48, but my concern here is the wind. There's going to be some wind kicking up, it looks like, in College Station for this game. I'm seeing in that 17, 18 mile per hour range. I don't get concerned about wind until it gets to 20, 25, but it's close enough to that number that, you just worry if it has some impact on the two teams, especially in the passing game. But I'm getting a little bit more interested in an over at a lower number of 48. I am on A&M. Anything -3 or better, I like the A&M side. Rob, what do you think here?
Yeah, I react to a lot of what you said there, Ian. As somebody who played Miami against SMU, it was extremely disappointing the way they played that day. As somebody who came back and played them against Pittsburgh, it was a struggle for a bit, and then they pulled away second half. But in that particular game, part of my reasoning was Pitt just can't protect their quarterback, and the freshman Mason Heinschel just never really had a chance in that game, and Pitt can't run the football. Here, your asset when you're Miami all season long really hasn't been Carson Beck in that offense. Carson Beck has been disappointing, to say the least, overall, from an overall perspective. But your asset is that defensive front and the pressure that they can apply. They showed it from game 1 all the way through the season. However, A&M has only allowed 12 sacks all season long. Are Ruben Bain and company going to get there? And Marcel Reed has the mobility to get out of harm's way, which Carson Beck doesn't have. And I think when you look at those two particular aspects of each team, A&M's got a bit of an advantage, especially if, like you say, if wind comes into play and we need more of a ground game. I would think A&M has that advantage, especially at home. Their defense, and I think you hit on this too, is what worried me a little bit. And you're right; it's been sporadic. You watch them and you think, "Wow, this is an elite defense," and then you watch them give up yardage chunks, and you're like, "Well, these guys aren't that great." Still, they're a pressure unit. And Beck is kind of a stationary target. Now, Miami's protected him really well. And he's the problem for me is he's got weaponry and he just has not been successful on a consistent basis throwing the football. So I look at them as more of a team that has to move the ball through the air, like have to move the ball through the air in order to be successful, where A&M can be more balanced. I lean with you on the A&M side here. It could be a field goal game. We can't project turnovers. We just don't know. But I don't think Ruben Bain and company are going to disrupt Reed as much as they've disrupted all their offenses this season. So for me, it would probably be a look at A&M. Total wise, I haven't gotten anywhere yet with that, but I think A&M's probably, especially home crowd, probably the right side here in College Station.
This will be McDonough and McElroy. I like that crew, McDonough and because McDonough is going to call out referees and people for doing dumb things. That's what I like about McDonough. He's not shy to voice his opinion on that when I listen to him do play-by-play. So that's a good crew. McDonough and McElroy. They'll call the Miami A&M game. All right, we got Tulane and Ole Miss. We've got Ole Miss 17.5-point favorites, 57 the total here in this game. You know, we obviously have a regular season meeting to look back on here as well with these two teams, Tulane and Ole Miss. And what I remember is that the Tulane defense is an odd bunch here this year, where you look at this group, and John Sumrall, by the way, of course, taking the Florida job, but will be here for at least this playoff game. Their defense it worries me against the pass in particular. We've seen some passing offenses carve them up, and Trinidad Chambliss was certainly able to do that in the first meeting between these two teams. As someone that had Tulane plus the 3 against North Texas in the AAC championship game, I'm thankful for all those North Texas turnovers, because to be honest with you, Tulane probably should have won that game by an even bigger margin, and yet North Texas was just hanging around there still in the fourth quarter. But thankfully, Tulane was able to bleed the clock out and hang on. But they had all those North Texas turnovers, and it was not Drew Mestamaker's best game at quarterback. And yet still, you take the turnovers away, it's not like they shut down North Texas. They still moved the football. They still rolled up the yards throughout that game on that Tulane defense. And that Tulane defense is susceptible against the pass. So my eyes told me in the first meeting, they can't stop the Ole Miss passing attack. They had issues with Chambliss. What's really going to change here in the rematch? I guess the one thing you could say is, well, Lane Kiffin's gone now, and is that going to just lead to a breakdown in command and a breakdown in just the operation of the offensive unit with Lane Kiffin not being there? That being said, he's given his blessing to allow Charlie Weiss Jr. to remain the offensive coordinator here for this football game against Tulane. So I don't know if I fully buy into that. Is it somewhat of a disruption? Of course. Their head coach is gone and he's not going to be there for this playoff game. But you still have the play caller there. You still got a defense that hasn't been able to stop the pass on the Tulane side, and a quarterback playing with great confidence in Trinidad Chambliss. And he certainly did in the Egg Bowl the last time we saw him, when they ripped it up against Mississippi State throughout much of that game. So I'm just going to run it back with, this bet would have cashed in the regular season meeting. You look back at recent Tulane Ole Miss games head-to-head going back years, because remember, there's been times when Lane Kiffin would go head-to-head with Tulane when Willie Fritz was the head coach of this team a few years ago, and there's been no evidence of Tulane slowing this team down in past head-to-head meetings. So I'm going to isolate Ole Miss team total here in this game, and that's the look for me. In this game, you can currently get their team total in that 36.5 range right now at most spots. I know you have to climb above the key number of 35. They're going to have to get more than that to cash the team total. I could still see it happening, though, when you look at the success they had against Tulane the first time. I think that's going to continue here. I just don't know what kind of tactical adjustments, especially in that leaky secondary, that the Tulane coaching staff's going to be able to make for against an Ole Miss team that had 548 total yards, 45 points in that first meeting. In 2023, it was 37 points for Tulane. In 2021, it was 61 points. You catch my drift. So 37 is what you need to cash a ticket. I think it's doable. Rob, what do you think?
Yeah, I think that if I was in your neck of the woods, that you and I could go to that sports bar that you sent me a picture of, and we could sit next to each other and drink all game long together, because I'm on the same bet. I just don't think 38 is out of the realm of possibility for Ole Miss. I've somewhat been a bandwagon guy where Trinidad Chambliss is concerned. I can't even emphasize how impressive he's been all season long, especially when he wasn't the starting quarterback to start the year. Got thrown in there, came from Ferris State, I believe it was, Division II, and went right into the SEC and picked defenses apart. Nobody scores 35 on Georgia. Nobody scores 34 on Oklahoma. And those were on the road. They should have beaten Georgia. I mean, they gave up 21 fourth quarter points, I think, but they had them in, they were in pretty good shape in that game. Again, to your point about what can Tulane do differently, the answer is probably nothing. I mean, there are answers, but I just don't think they're reachable for Tulane. Like, you would have to control the ball and keep it away from Ole Miss in this game. And even with that being said, if you're not laying 17 and a half and you're just playing Ole Miss to score points, even if the other side has time of possession, Ole Miss scores so quickly, it really doesn't matter. The pass defense that you talked about with Tulane, they've been absolutely destroyed by any American Athletic Conference team that can throw the football. I think they gave up 300 plus in 4 of their last 6, might be 5 of their last 7. But even in the North Texas game, like you say, North Texas was pretty much up and down the field. They're not going to stop Ole Miss. Now, to the point of what does the Lane Kiffin moving on to LSU mean? These kids seem to love Pete Golding. I mean, the hire is from within. You get the added product here of, like you say, Charlie Weiss staying as the OC. So everything, game planning, play calling, it's all going to be the same. They're after a national title. You know, if it was a regular bowl game, Ian, I might say Ole Miss looks at this game as if, you know, we destroyed Tulane. Who cares? We're 17.5-point favorites. We can beat them without studying film, without practicing hard. With all we have to do is show up. But you're going after a national championship, so we can presume that you're going to get 60 minutes of focus out of this team. Jake Ritzlaff, to me, you know, maybe I'm in a small boat here because I hear a lot of people saying how impressive Jake Ritzlaff has been this year. To me, I thought Tulane would be better offensively than what they were. At times, it's been like pulling teeth trying to get them to score points. So I'm with you, over 36.5. As long as it stayed on that dead number right there, I consider it dead because I always thought 38 was the key for Ole Miss anyway. It was one of my larger bets. This one, Ole Miss team total over 36.5.
Yeah, we completely agree on this one. I think they can get to that 38 number. And I say this on all the shows, and I'll just reiterate it to you, Rob, that when we're talking about moderate favorites, I do this so often in the NFL with teams where they're laying 7, 9, 10, in this case in college, 14, 17 points. I just go right to team total over if I think they're going to score points, because I don't want to be there at 38-17 Ole Miss with 3 minutes to go in the fourth quarter, and I'm hanging on hoping Ole Miss doesn't put up that Ole passive defense, and here's Tulane right down the field for a garbage touchdown, and there's Tulane through the back door. If you laid 17.5 with Ole Miss, you're a loser. Whereas if you took the team total over instead, you've already won your bet, you've cashed your ticket, and you don't have to deal with unnecessary, not unnecessary, not wanted stress at the end of these games. And that's exactly why I always go the team total, especially with bigger favorites. Because I could see that in this game where, 38-17 and Tulane's got the ball with 2 minutes left, and they're going to try to score that late touchdown. And maybe Ole Miss is playing that, passive defense and just lets Tulane go right down the field. We see it over and over again. So I always say bigger favorites. I gravitate to team total over, especially if I know they've got a pretty potent offense.
Yeah, and in this particular case, Ian, I'd have to agree with you, because if you just look at those two options from betting, one option, betting side at 17.5, you're on the wrong side of a key number, laying 17.5, and team total over 36.5. You're on the good side of
Yeah.
the key number with some wiggle room. I mean, 37 is not common, but it could happen and get you paid. So in this particular instance, the way it's lined, I think team total, or I thought team total was the right way to go. So you and I, we line up on this one. We'll hoist one up for Ole Miss here.
Yeah, no doubt. I think that Tulane game is Palmer and Joe Tess. Oh my God, Joe Tess on the call.
Yeah.
He gets excited. He gets excited just a little bit. He's got his WWE. He sounds like a wrestling announcer every time he's doing college football these days. But yeah, this game, James Madison, Oregon, is Bob Wischusen and Lewis Riddick. It'll be James Madison and Oregon here. We've got Oregon 21-point favorites, 47.5 the total here in this one. I like James Madison early. That's kind of where I've landed in this game, that maybe early in the game, James Madison can hang a little bit. Keep in mind, the strength of their team defensively, they're pretty good against the run, very good, in fact. And so, when you look at this Oregon team, it's kind of that team now where, yes, Dante Moore's been very, very good throwing the ball, but it's still a team that relies on certainly being able to incorporate the run game with Whittington and that stable of backs that they have, Oregon. Can James Madison at least hang in the trenches? Do I trust them for 60 minutes to hang in the trenches on the road against Oregon? Probably not, because you could see them clearly getting worn down. So first quarter might even be the stronger target that I have in this game, because I do worry that as this game goes on, Oregon starts leaning on JMU, and we start to see those physical advantages in the trenches along the line of scrimmage start to show up gradually here in this game. But it is a big full game number too with Oregon 21. There's definitely a possibility, they'd be able to cover a number like this. The thing that also worries me too, Rob, about James Madison full game and why I kind of lean more toward an early look with them is because I watched that game against Troy, and I don't know if I trust Alonzo Barnett to do much throwing the ball. I just don't. It wasn't pretty against Troy. And if you're having issues in the passing game at home against Troy in that Sun Belt Championship game, it's going to be, that times 10 in the difficulty meter on the road in Eugene on a Saturday night with potential for some rain in the forecast, although it looks like the rain might dissipate before kickoff. So looks like the forecast has cleared up a little bit. Oregon, to me, is definitely going to win and advance in this game. I just think there's going to be too many issues for James Madison's offense to keep up for 60 minutes. I think the defense is good enough to hang early, but I think it was, as we often see with Oregon, they can just break games open. They've been able to do that at times in the past. Big number, 21. So I'm not rushing to lay a full 3 touchdowns. I do think James Madison comes out with a spirited effort here to start this game. So I do like the first quarter with James Madison, lean to the first half as well, but I really like first quarter more than anything, because I think that could be that early, push we see from James Madison. And then as the game goes on, Oregon maybe starts to take over as the game goes on. But Rob, what do you think here, James Madison, Oregon?
Yeah, you know what you say makes a lot of sense if you like the JMU side, Ian. Get them early, because I just offensively, I don't trust them. You go back to the Washington State game where they couldn't move the football. Washington State's a pretty aggressive defense. They really, all of their numbers, to me, James Madison went a little bit backwards this year on the offensive side of the football under Bob Chesney. He's done a great job. Let's not diminish what Bob Chesney's done. He's on his way to UCLA. He's going to coach here. But on the offensive side of the football, I expected week-to-week consistency out of them, big numbers. There were a couple of times where I played their team total and got burned, and maybe I'm just bitter. But when you put up 63 on Old Dominion, who can't really defend, and 59 against Coastal Carolina, who can't defend, 58 App State, etc., their statistical stuff is skewed by games against bad defenses. Anybody who could play a lick of defense kind of held JMU in check. Here, their defense just doesn't have the advantage against their front seven and their pass coverage, which is really, really good, an asset to the team. But you're up against true Big Ten wide receivers. And I've said this before, I'll say it again, and you mentioned it a little bit. Dan Lanning, as head coach of Oregon, it's no longer a finesse team. I mean, he's brought that Georgia mentality to the Pacific Northwest, where they rotate 8 or 9 defensive linemen through there. Their offensive linemen are getting drafted year after year under Dan Lanning. This is a very physical football team. And Dante Moore, listen, for what it's worth, he just lost, Heisman Trophy to Fernando Mendoza. He could be out to prove he's the best quarterback out there. I don't know that that means a heck of a lot because he'll still stick within the game plan, but I could see a big showing out of Dante Moore here. If it rains, I almost feel like that helps Oregon. They play up there in Eugene in the lousy weather all the time. It's not really something that bothers them. But I do think over the course of time in this game, it's going to get rough. 21 looks like a big number. When you sit there and say to yourself, you know what, could they win this game 34-10? It doesn't sound like a blowout, but actually it covers the number, right? I'm a little skeptical to go ahead and play the Oregon team total over, although maybe I shouldn't be because they could pile on late. That being said, if they're up a big number, it could be preservation time late, right? You got a next round game to play. Let's pull the important guys and just run out the clock here. So the number is tough. I think if I was going to play Oregon, and this is kind of the way you took the early approach with JMU first quarter, I could take the first half approach with Oregon where there are still 10 and a halves available and say to myself, could it be 17-6 at halftime and you win a bet? Very, very possible. I don't know if JMU is going to convert touchdowns instead of having to kick field goals.
Yeah, that's going to be not with that passing attack I've seen from Barnett at both games, Washington State and Troy, and they were at home. Both of those games, he had real issues as far as efficiency, accuracy, precision in the passing game. It's been a very, very run-heavy offense. When they run, they have success, and that's when they've piled up the points and the yards, and it obviously will not be that easy to do. I think we have some big just gusto from James Madison early, too, because they've heard it, too. James Madison has heard it from the media and the narrative that they shouldn't even be in this playoff compared to some of the power conference teams at Notre Dame, Texas, Vanderbilt, some of those other teams that got left out. So they're going to want to come out strong and spirited, but I just don't know how long that's going to last because I think as 4 quarters unfold in this game, you're going to see, obviously, Oregon just start leaning on them. As this game goes on. The total's tricky to me, 47.5, because I'll tell you what, you're not going to get pace on either side. James Madison, is going to slow it down and try to have, fewer possessions in this game, 28.8 seconds per play. That's 122 in the country. And Oregon's not that much faster, 103 in the country, 27.7 seconds per play. Like, not the Chip Kelly days anymore. We're long removed from that when they were going super fast. This is not that same Oregon tempo anymore. So tempo-wise, it's an under. Does the efficiency match the tempo? If it does, this game could stay under. Plus, you throw in the chance of rain. We'll see about that. Your thoughts on the total, Rob?
Well, I think, I say this in basketball a lot, too. Slow-tempo teams don't always mean under when they're extremely efficient, and I think you use that word as well. For Oregon, it may be slow tempo, but man, they rip it off in chunks, right? They're 5th in the nation in yards per play. And to your point about maybe their physical presence, I usually put it a different way, but we were saying the same thing, is that, emotion is great to start a game. Eventually it wears off and talent wins the game. And with Oregon's side here and the way they can strike big play-wise in an instant, and even through their defense, Ian, I mean, defensively, you could get a score out of Oregon here as well. You mentioned Barnett's shortcomings, and against a defense like this, you could almost see a pick six or something that sets up the offense in relatively good field position. So I don't know what I'm going to get out of James Madison for points here. I think if you bet over, you need 13. If you think James Madison's going to get to 13, I think you probably get up and over the total. If you don't think they can get to 13, you're playing under.
All right, let's shift our attention, Rob. It's time. That was college football, but we'll shift now to the National Football League because I like this card. Well, it's been a great NFL season for me. I mean, I've done personally as far as, service related. It's been great as far as, the shows I've been on. I do a show on Sundays, the NFL Pub Hub with Jimmy the Bag. And the record in that, it's like 30-some units of profit with the plays I've given out in the NFL. It's been just a terrific NFL season. And last week was another good week. I like the overs as well, just like you do. And I've been picking the right games with those in the NFL. You know, we had Bills Patriots over last week. We had a 49er team total and Titan 49er over last week, both of them in that game. Was able to cash that. We had the Giants and Commanders over that total last week as well. So we've just been good with picking which games we think are going to be higher scoring as well throughout the course. It was a smaller bet, but I had some of that Viking Cowboy over in the Sunday night game as well. So like I said, that's been good. The sides have been solid. It's just been a good NFL season. We'll see if we can keep it going here. Just 30 seconds, Rob, on each on this game, just because it's the Thursday game. This video is only going to be up for an hour or two before this game kicks off. Rams and Seahawks. I think it's a definite Seattle spot. Rams on a short week. Devontae Adams banged up. The defense showing holes all of a sudden. You know, we certainly love what we've seen this season from the Rams defense. No question about that. And you have to give a lot of credit, Rob, to this guy's name is definitely in the next head coach department. Chris Shula done an absolutely phenomenal job here leading this Rams defense, no question. But they've shown some cracks lately. You know, Detroit was able to move the ball. Carolina, Bryce Young, I was a little flabbergasted they were that successful with the offense against the Rams a couple weeks ago. So that's a concern. We always say road later in the season on Thursday night football for the road team. The Thursday night game is even tougher than it is earlier in the season. I think a lot of things line up for Seattle here at home, but the problem is, and I do have a small bet on Seattle money line. I do. But why I'm not going more gusto than that? It's you know what it is. It's Sam Darnold. You know, in a big spot, in a big game against a big-time opponent, coming off a game where he had 4 interceptions against the Rams earlier this year. But the counter to that is 4 interceptions against the Rams in L.A., and they were still one possession away from tying or that game or taking the lead and winning it. For as bad as he was against the L.A. Rams a few weeks ago in the first meeting, but it has been a little bit of a steady matriculation of decline in his play overall, Darnold, in recent weeks. He wasn't good against the Colts last week, even though they escaped with the win. So that's the obvious bugaboo. But there's certainly a lot of things spot-wise, situationally, that line up nicely for the Seahawks. Can they take advantage, Rob? What do you think for Thursday night football? Thankfully, Al and Kirk have a great game for a change, a big game.
Yeah, and just to expand on what you said, I mean, that first game was all Seattle. And Jason Myers has a chance. I mean, it's a small chance, 61-yard field goal to win the game. It's a limited chance, but it was a chance despite the 4 picks. The 414 yards they gained in that game was the most the Rams have given up all season long. The 249 they allowed was the least the Rams have given up all season long. 26-12 first down advantage, 15 and a half time of possession advantage, 15 and a half minutes. It was all Seattle in that game. I mean, the Rams on their home turf couldn't do anything against that defense. So I think Seattle takes a lot of solace in that. Couple of things that were interesting in that game. Cooper Kupp was on a snap count. He was just back from a hamstring injury. Rashid Shaheed had just been acquired, had no familiarity with Darnold. We saw last week the targets went up for Shaheed as he gets more used to being in that offense. I'd expect a little extra there. Even with that said, they still threw for 279. Smith and Jigba and A.J. Barner were the main culprits in that one. 19 catches, 175 yards. I think Seattle's got the weaponry here. Add to it, they were home Sunday. Short work week, they get to stay home. Rams had all kinds of flight difficulties last night. Couldn't get their flight, had to end up splitting the team in half, flying in the middle of the night, et cetera, et cetera. It can't help at all. I think Nakua's sitting out the first series here today because he's, all over the place saying crazy things. His brother's out stealing cars. I don't know that matters, but there's still exterior things that are going on with the Rams. And of course, like you said, no Devontae Adams. I'm with you. Their defense outside of the pass rush has been a little bit vulnerable, maybe more than a little bit vulnerable or susceptible. Problem for Seattle, and my only concern in this game, Ian, really quick, is that Charles Cross, the left tackle, the protection of the blind side of Sam Darnold, is out for this. We'll see what Josh Jones can do. He's a massive human being. He's like 3'7" or 6'7", 319 or whatever. But against that Rams pass rush, you do worry a little bit.
Trubisky and Verse on the other side could take advantage of that. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yep.
that's
Yep.
what you worry about here. And I'm sure they've game planned well. I love what Mike McDonald has done. I actually 10 days ago bet Seattle to win the NFC at plus 450. Probably missed. I know I missed the boat on a way better price, but I purposely don't bet it early because of injury factors. But here I'm on Seattle. I mean, I laid 1.5 points. It seems to me that they can win this game by a field goal at home. The 12th man may come into play here today.
All right, there we go. Good stuff. All right, Saturday. We have a doubleheader on Saturday. That's why Saturday is great. You got the 3 college football playoff first-round games and 2 NFL games on Saturday as well, starting with Philly and Washington. Philly -7, 44.5 the total here in this game. I'm going to try to get through every game, so we'll keep it to 1 to 2 minutes for each game here. What I will say about this is I'm going to take a shot with the Commanders here. +7. Now that it's hit 7, I'm interested. Okay, Philly, obviously, they dominated the Raiders. Raiders are awful. Raiders are just ridiculously bad, especially the offensive line. You know, the Kenny Pickett didn't give them any sort of jump offensively. It's just because the offensive line doesn't get fixed just because you change quarterbacks. It's still the same shitty offensive line you've had all year. So it's not surprising. Washington is still showing effort. And I had to laugh and chuckle because I took the Commanders along with that over against the Giants, that they moved the market after the Jaden Daniels being ruled out, saying, well, Daniels is out, let's bet the Giants now. Mariota's been fine. Mariota's been soft. Mariota almost engineered a good overtime win against Denver, a very good team on a Sunday night a few weeks ago. When he played Atlanta earlier in the year, even though they didn't win that football game, he played well. They moved the football. Mariota's been showing signs of being capable, and is things just all of a sudden they're back now because they beat the Raiders in a big fashion? I'm not so sure. At 7 now, and Washington's historically given Philly some problems in head-to-head meetings. So at 7, I'm in. I'm a buyer now. It's +7 with Washington. Rob, what do you think here for this one?
I'll say real quick, Ian, that game against Denver spurred me on to betting Washington the following week against Minnesota, where they got destroyed 31-0. But I'm going to say this. For whatever reason, they had 2 different game plans when Mariota's in the game and when Jaden Daniels is in the game. And against Denver, with that 55 sack pass rush that leads the NFL, all they did was come out and quick throw until Denver totally backed off and didn't rush anymore. Then they bring Daniels in, they get destroyed. Then they come back to Mariota and do the same thing against a decent pass rush. Philadelphia's got a really good pass rush, and I can see this short, quick game moving the football, controlling some clock. Jalen Carter may not play in this one. Philadelphia's offensive line is still banged up. It's still divisional. And in my write-up for that Minnesota game, I had said exactly what you're saying now, is that they still show fight. Then, of course, they go get shut out, and I look like an idiot for writing it. But then they come back last week and do what they did. And I really think it's due to the offensive game plan, which with Mariota in, I'm almost happier that Mariota is the starting quarterback because I know what they're going to do. Their receivers are very capable here. And Philly in the secondary is a little bit susceptible. If you can just negate that Philly pass rush a little bit, you've got a shot.
You certainly do. So I like them now with getting the 7 there. The other Saturday game, this is a dandy. It's another showdown with the Packers and Bears. Second game in 3 weeks with these two teams head-to-head in a battle for first in the NFC North. Green Bay, 1-point favorite, 46.5 the total here in this game. Obviously, the big story is obviously coming out of that Green Bay game, beleaguered with injuries after that loss to the Denver Broncos. You lost the game. You lost key players on both sides of the ball. Micah Parsons, Zach Tom, Christian Watson. Go on down the list. I mean, there's just a walking wounded coming out of that game for the Green Bay Packers. And, Christian Watson's a big deal. No question about that. Now, the good news is you just got the rookie out of Texas, Matthew Golden, back at receiver. And you're going to have to hope he picks up some of the slack because Watson will certainly be missed. You got multiple injuries now at the receiver spot. That's going to be interesting to see how they fare. It's obviously short turnaround revenge for the Bears, who actually made a great account of themselves at Lambeau. They hung in there. And Caleb Williams has a chance late in that game, and he throws the interception there. Just a bad decision to throw that into the end zone on that 4th down. He only needed 1 yard there, but he threw to the end zone, and it got picked off. Game over. Green Bay wins. Something tells me the Bears are going to get payback here. It's just a tough spot. It's the second road game in a row after being in Denver last week. The money's moved to Chicago. Some of it's mine. Already took the Bears earlier this week. Rob, what do you think here? Green Bay, Chicago.
Yeah, I don't think that this total should be 40-70, and under doesn't come out of my mouth very often, but I just lean towards under here. A, it's just going to have a playoff type atmosphere to it. It's that important for both sides in this particular contest. B, the injuries that you talked about for Green Bay are extremely harmful. I think the Zach Tom injury is as harmful as
Yes.
any.
Oh,
But you have Roma Dunze and DeAndre Swift on the other side, and or excuse me, and Luther Burden. So you limit the receiving options for Caleb Williams. To me, Ben Johnson has shown that he wants to lean on teams with his running game. Speaks to the under a little bit. I think they might be able to run on Green Bay and control some clock in this one. And for Green Bay, without Christian Watson, without Zach Tom, maybe their passing game has to turn to a ground game, which may not have Josh Jacobs. So to me, 47 points just looked like a very, very high number. They only got to 49 the first time, and that was a relatively solid offensive game by both. I love your point about Green Bay having to go on these back-to-backs. Again, Saturday, remember, it's a short work week. Again, we talk about Thursdays being short work week. Saturdays are too. And when you travel from Denver after getting beat up a little bit there, now you got to go against another physical team in Ben Johnson's Bears. I just think a 47 is too high, so I'm going to be on the under 47 in that game.
all right, we move to Sunday where we have Buffalo, Cleveland. Buffalo 10.5-point road favorites, 41.5 the total in this game. Spot wise, it screams Cleveland. Do you trust Cleveland? That's going to be they're getting 10.5. They're a home dog, but Buffalo. Look, if Buffalo gets up big, and Josh Allen and that offense are rolling, and certainly they've been rolling 2 weeks in a row now. Well, it took them a while against New England last week, but then once they got going in the second half, Patriots couldn't stop them. And with that huge comeback win to beat New England last week, but coming off that, the comeback win against Cincinnati, where they were down early at home 2 weeks ago, the two big interceptions of Burrow to swing that game right toward Buffalo at the end in a game they had been trailing. Those are two monster wins, come from behind fashion both times. You know what I mean? Now you're going to Cleveland, and I could just see this being a just find a way to get it done and move on, not necessarily winning by this kind of margin. What can Shedeur Sanders do against the Buffalo defense is the question. The Buffalo defense is still vulnerable against the run, though, as we saw last week, especially in that first half. Travion Anderson made a mockery of that Buffalo run defense in the first half. They made their adjustments. They were better in the second half against the run against him, but still, that's an area of concern. And the Browns are a team that can, at times with Judkins, have some success running the ball. So I'm trying to talk myself into Cleveland. Haven't moved on it yet. I lean that way, though. See, Rob, what do you think? Bills, Browns.
Yeah, you made the point I would have made, Ian. Buffalo's vulnerability on that defensive side is the rush defense. And for whatever reason, that rush defense shut New England down last week as Josh Allen brought them back touchdown after touchdown after touchdown. I think Shedeur Sanders, again, the concern there is if you're in down and distance, is he more helpful as the Browns quarterback or as the quarterback against the Bills defense? They can score points that way too. I think they played last week without Christian Benford in the secondary. I didn't check his status here. Boy, fundamentally, it's very, very hard to get to Cleveland at this point. Judkins probably could break off a couple of runs. Is it enough? We see how fast Buffalo can score points. Buffalo's still in pursuit of New England, so there's still some motivation there. However, I think this was something you added at the end of the analysis.
I'm seeing Benford and Terrell Bernard were both at practice today for the Bills. That's a good sign.
Very helpful.
Two big key defenders, really key. He's a great linebacker, Terrell Bernard, too. That would be huge if they get him back.
And especially where run is concerned. I mean, he's a hitter. I think the only thing that concerns me, and I think you did hit on this, is that how badly do they need to win by 11? It could be just one of those, let's get the win, let's get out. We had maximum focus last week. I don't know. I just think that they'll play the full 60 simply because of the way the standings are, and they're not secure in their position yet. So you got to take these winnable games and make sure you win them. For that reason, I would probably slightly lean Buffalo, but again, there's too much contradiction for me on the other side to really make a strong stance with the Bills.
All right. Next up, we got Vikings and Giants. Vikings -3, On the road in New York, the total here sitting at 43.5, pretty much in most spots here in this game. I look at let me just take a quick look here as far as the weather forecast is concerned here for New York on Sunday. I mean, earlier in the week when I looked at it, didn't look that bad. And right now, no rain and only 15-mile-per-hour winds. We can handle that. Yeah, I already bet the over anyway in this game, and I like it. I think it goes over this total. J.J. McCarthy starting to get a little swagger back the last couple of weeks. You mentioned that shutout against Washington for Minnesota when J.J. came back. He obviously played a much better game. He was very good against Dallas. Now, I know Dallas's defense is Swiss cheese. It's terrible for the most part. They had a little resurgence there for a bit, but back to the same old lullaby when it comes to the Dallas defense the last couple weeks with their struggles. And J.J. McCarthy and the Viking offense looked fine. I guess the biggest concern here is obviously the O-line situation because, again, we've got Darrisaw and O'Neal. Here we go again. Just as they were starting to get their offense rolling a bit, here we go with two key, very important, maybe their two best offensive linemen that are on the injury report this week. But the Giant defense hasn't been good for a very long time now. Washington's up and down the field last week against them. That's why I was on the over in that game, hoping the Vikings maybe can patch it together still. And you do have JJ's athleticism and mobility that can maybe make things happen, even if that O-line's a bit of a concern. But I think the Giants still can have some success moving the ball themselves with Dart. The Vikings defense, I don't view it as a shutdown defense. Dallas was able to have some success moving it. Totals in the low 40s, where 24-21 is an over. I think that's very doable. Would have been happier with Darrisaw and O'Neal healthy. That does concern me, but I still like over. I mean, I had this circled early in the week that I think this total looked too low with these two teams. Rob, what do you think here? Vikes, Giants.
Boy, I would agree. And, with Minnesota, it's been week to week in these games. They were healthy, finally, all five offensive linemen healthy about 2 weeks ago. And it showed up in that 31-0 win. I played that game over against Dallas on Sunday night, and immediately you see Darrisaw on the sidelines, and you think, man, I'm going to be in trouble. But they still put up points. I think Minnesota's getting used to playing. It's been ever since they were overseas that these three guys have been hurt. They've been playing without 3/5 of this offensive line for the majority of the season. I feel like they're making some headway offensively here. 3 weeks ago, we see Justin Jefferson throwing his helmet in the turf. Now we see Justin Jefferson making catches again. Addison making big plays. Giants defense, that what was supposed to be a highly paid, very productive pass rush is banged up as well. I don't know that they're going to get to McCarthy. And to your point, Jackson Dart, when he's in the game, they score on everybody. I don't care who his receivers are, who his backs are. They just move the ball and score. So 43.5, you know how much I like overs. I totally agree that game should at least get to the 44 mark, which is a key number. If you like over, don't let it get to 44. Go ahead and play it now.
All right, good stuff. On we go to how about this? Someone's going to win this terrible division and be in the playoffs. Tampa Bay, Carolina, battle for first in the NFC South. And only one of these teams is going to get in. Only the division winners making the playoffs, obviously. We've got Tampa Bay, 3-point road favorites, total here in the 46 range. Here's the issue right now. How do you lay points on the road with Tampa, what we've seen the last 2 weeks? The New Orleans game, Tyler Shuck, running amok on them, moving the football. Baker Mayfield, on the offense, just schizophrenic, erratic. Look, he's missed some throws too lately. And the offensive line, it's been shocking. It's been shocking. They had 0 pass rush last week against Kirk Cousins and the Atlanta Falcons in that loss, and have a 14-point lead at home in the fourth quarter in a game you got to have as you're trying to win a division and make the playoffs, and you just absolutely, utterly collapse. And Todd Bowles is going profanity-laced tirade after the game. It was so bad last week. That could go either one way. I don't know. Does it rally the troops? And even if it does, you got to show you're good enough. So it's hard to lay 3 with Tampa. It's hard for me to take Carolina, too. That looked like a young team with deer in the headlights. Big spot. You had a chance to take advantage of Tampa's loss to Atlanta, playing New Orleans last week, and you could not close the door, and you could not get the job done against the New Orleans Saints. So part of me thinks for Dave Canales' team, Rob, are they mature enough? Are they experienced enough to handle winning pressure games like this in the month of December to make the playoffs? So it's a very, very hard side for me to this game. I'm inclined to lean over, but because the Tampa defense has fallen off. We saw that last week. The Carolina defense, it was actually not bad last week. And Bryce Young, the thing with this over is that, are you going to get Bryce Young on the week where he's playing like he did against the Rams? Or are you going to get him on a week where, last week against the Saints, he was mediocre throughout much of that game? And I lost an over with that Saints. I didn't cash every over. I had Saints Panthers over last week, and I was frustrated seeing how disappointing, disheartening Bryce Young was coming off that great game he had against a great Rams team and nothing close to it last week. So I'd lean over mildly. Not my favorite look, though. Rob, what do you think for this big show? I say big loosely, big showdown, but it is a big showdown because only one of these teams is getting in. They're mediocre teams, though.
Yes, certainly the importance level is there. And the fact that we're here in week 15 or whatever, calling Tampa Bay mediocre wasn't something we would have said 15 weeks ago. We actually thought this would, at least I did it. You would have thought this would have been, and it's a majority opinion, that it would have been a runaway division for Tampa Bay. And not only, what makes it worse for Tampa Bay is they're known for being a stout run defense. And you watch Bijan Robinson in Atlanta just run through, up, over, with no reason to play. Honestly, Atlanta was eliminated. And still, Tampa Bay couldn't find a way to stop
And how
them.
do you allow 150 receiving yards to the tight end, Kyle Pitts? It's ridiculous.
Yeah, that's another thing because the leading receiver doesn't even play in that game, and yet Kyle Pitts, who hasn't done a thing his whole career, goes crazy against them. So there were some things that showed up last week that aren't good. Obviously, Baker's been hurt. Obviously, Bucky Irving just got back into the lineup. Mike Evans is now hurt, didn't practice today. They've got issues all around. Carolina has offensive line issues here. And to your point about last week, it is kind of, you do have to question whether or not they're primetime ready to go ahead and win a division against a team that's done it for a few years in a row now. Carolina's been better at home is the only thing I come back to is their home performances. They beat the Rams here. They beat New Orleans by 10 here, get whacked by Buffalo, but beat Dallas. The home performances have been better. I really think on paper, Tampa Bay is the better team, but they're just not playing like it at this point in time. So side has to get thrown out the window. Total becomes an option. I'm with you. If I had to play and I haven't yet, you probably look to the over, but I do want to see what goes on with these Carolina offensive line injuries. 3 guys listed as questionable here, which isn't going to help Bryce Young, who under pressure, no quarterback is good under pressure. We've seen him absolutely wilt under pressure before.
Yeah, there's no question about that.
Todd Bowles not afraid to blitz.
No, that is for sure. Kansas City, Tennessee. We've got Kansas City 3-point road favorites, 37.5 the total. I got the hook. I bet 10. It's not a big bet. I don't love it. We're still asking a bad football team to win this game. But what kind of mentality is Kansas City really taking the field with here in this game? You just got bounced from the playoffs. This is not just a team that's missing the playoffs for the first time in years. They've been to the AFC Championship game. How many years in a row? 5 or 6 now. And now all of a sudden they're not getting back there. They're not even in the playoffs now. That is a gut punch for a team that is not used to this. I do not have any interest in laying points on the road with Kansas City. I don't care who's in, who's out. We know Mahomes' season is over, so the mustache man, Gardner Minshew, is going to be the quarterback here for Kansas City. I'll say this about Tennessee. They're not a good football team, but it's against San Francisco. They moved the ball a little bit. They showed some pulses. Every time the Niners looked like they were going to pull away, there's Tennessee moving the ball again. So it's not like they've totally, called it quits on the season and waved the white flag, Mike McCoy's group. They're still battling. They might sense this as an opportunity to win a game, and I just don't know what Kansas City is bringing to the table here, if anything. So I did take the Titans here. Rob, any thoughts?
Yeah, I played the Titans team total. Ian, Kansas City, I know everybody's going to look at the Mahomes injury, but the defense is racked with injuries. And to your point about mentality, where's the focus level in a game like this after you've been eliminated and you're the Kansas City Chiefs? It just doesn't seem like the defense would even show up here. And I also agree with you that Tennessee, from what I've seen, Cam Ward's getting a little more comfortable. They're moving the ball a little bit better. They've scored, their team total, by the way, is 16.5. So they've scored 17 or more in 4 of their last 6 games. The offense has been upgraded. And in a couple of those, in fact, in 3 of those, you can honestly say they did it against premier defenses. They did it against the Chargers. They did it against Seattle. San Francisco is not an elite defense by any means because of injuries, but still, like you say, 24 points on the road. I just thought 16.5 was too low, somewhat situational, somewhat fundamental. I think you combine them both and you come up with Tennessee to get to 17 points here.
All right, Chargers and Cowboys. This is also one Eastern. Dallas 2.5 point favorites, 49.5 the total in this game. Yeah, I'll be on I'll be on the Chargers in some form. Like I know this is Herbert's gotten through a lot right now. There's no question about it. But I survived with a winning ticket with the Chargers against the Eagles Monday night a couple weeks ago, and just from a they're finding ways right now, this Chargers team, and you got to give them a ton of credit for it. Herbert is not close to 100%. They're finding ways. Their defense, is playing really strong and trying to help out Herbert, even as he's trying to gut his way through his injury that he's still playing through. And now with Dallas, that's now the Detroit loss. That's another disappointing loss to Minnesota last Sunday night. You really want to lay points with them, knowing that their season's pretty much over? Well, I guess, they can win out, Philly can lose out, and that's Dallas can still get in. That's probably not happening. And I think Dallas probably knows it. So I'm okay as an underdog taking the Chargers here. And we know Dallas's home field's minimal. Any thoughts here, Rob? Chargers, Cowboys.
Yeah, Dallas will know their fate, right? By the time their game starts. Philly plays Saturday. If they win, Dallas knows they're finished. Do you think they'll come to play if they're finished? I don't know. That's debatable. Maybe at home in front of the home fans, they give it the old college try and they produce offensively. The Chargers, boy, they just can't protect that Justin Herbert. They just can't protect. I know the tackles have been out all season, but the offensive line is in shambles.
Yeah.
You're right. It's amazing to me that they're able to win games the way they're winning them. Dallas does have the ability to get after the passer if they come to play. So I'm going to sit back on this one for a minute. LA obviously playing to remain in the playoffs. They're in a pretty good spot right now at 10-4. But when you're being chased by another 10-4 and a 9-5, who aren't going to win their divisions, and neither are you. I mean, these wild card bursts become tough to come by, so they have to keep winning here. I think I could make counter arguments each way. But again, it will be interesting to see Dallas's mindset because they will know what they have to do after Saturday. Maybe it's best to just let the Saturday Philadelphia game play out and then bet this game at that point.
All right, Cincinnati, Miami. Cincinnati, 4-point road favorites, 47.5 the total in this game. I mean, the media and some fans are going to phrase it like Tua's getting benched because he's been bad. It's not all just that. In fact, it's probably more so. Look, we've been officially eliminated now. We did spend a 7th-round draft pick on Quinn Ewers. We're not going anywhere this season. We want to get him some reps. We want to see what he can do, in an NFL football game. I think it's more to do with that than just, hey, Tua's had a rough season, didn't play well at all against Pittsburgh in the cold Monday night. Let's bench him. No, the season's over. You got to get Quinn Ewers probably some action. That's probably Mike McDaniel's thinking here when it comes to starting Quinn Ewers for his first NFL start. Now, what does that mean for success here? Your guess is as good as mine. One thing's for sure is we know this ain't the 85 Bears will be lining up against with this Cincinnati Bengals defense. So does that give him a puncher's chance for success immediately here in his first start? We'll have to wait and see. This is probably going to be a sit back and watch game. I can tell you I'm not interested in betting either defense under right now, but I'm slamming the over either here in this game. Burrow was really rough last week, and I can't figure out why because he played so well against Buffalo the week before, and he even played okay in the first meeting against Baltimore. But you do have to give some credit to the Ravens defense, played a lot better, but he just couldn't get anything going. And now you see the quotes in the media about how he seems like he's, disillusioned that it's been another lost season, and now they're pressing him about, you want to be a Bengal long term, and could you see yourself playing somewhere else? So who knows where Joe's headspace is at now that the Bengals are officially eliminated. So that's what makes it tough for me to get involved. Lean over if I had to, because the weather won't be much of an issue down in Miami and the warmth. But right now, nothing for me here. Rob, what do you think?
Yeah, it's been a great season as far as cashing tickets, fading the Cincinnati defense, or playing on there. One way or another, we've been playing overs where Cincinnati games are concerned all season long. Here it becomes more difficult to a lot of the reasons that you just said. What is Quinn Ewers? I mean, Cincinnati's defense stinks, but can Quinn Ewers actually exploit it? I'm not sure. I know Devon Achane can, and if they just want to go run heavy and short pass heavy, then maybe they can do some damage offensively. Joe Burrow last week without T. Higgins, it didn't look the same. I just saw a report earlier that T. Higgins showed up to practice today. Maybe T. Higgins plays. But you're right. Joe Burrow's got an awful lot to say about the future of Cincinnati, and the future meaning next year, not necessarily Sunday. He's more concerned about the organization and everything else. They could score against this defense if they come to play. I can't see them having as bad an offensive performance as they had last week. I think right now my decision comes down to, do I play Cincinnati team total over, or do I play full game over, thinking that Achane and company can just continue to do what everybody else has done against Cincinnati's defense all season long.
All right, late games, Atlanta, Arizona. Atlanta 2.5, 47.5 the total here in this matchup between these two teams. And there's going to be one. This is a matchup of coaches that are going to be filing their resumes after the season. I don't think either one's going to be back when you look at it. Raheem Morris for Atlanta, Jonathan Gannon for Arizona. I think they're both donezo as far as that's concerned. At least with Atlanta last week against a division rival, they dug in and they found a way to come back and win. This Arizona team, certainly on the defensive side of the football, they've kind of called it quits, because other than the Tampa game, remember Baker was banged up, not healthy in that Tampa game where they were actually looked okay on defense. Other than that, 41 to San Fran, 27 to Jacksonville, 44 to Seattle, 45 to the Rams, 40 to Houston last week. QUIT on the defensive side of the football. Quit from Arizona multiple weeks in a row. I've already moved two ways on this game. You can take Atlanta minus 2.5 if you want, but I took the team total over for the Falcons, and I also took this full game over. It seems like a lot of people have, because this number's moved quite a bit. They just look like a defense that's just completely caved in right now. But at the same point in time, Arizona can still move the football. I'll tell you one guy that's still trying and playing hard and making things happen. That's Jacoby Brissett, and hats off to him, because he's still throwing that ball and still trying to make things happen. The offense is actually not that bad. The defense is. So I think it's a high-scoring game. Rob, what do you think?
Yeah, I think it's a mechanical play, knee-jerk type play where you just play over. The Arizona Cardinals, their games have gone over this number of 47.5, 7 of the last 9, and I mean way over, like into the 50s and 60s over. Part of it's because they're always playing from behind, and Jacoby Brissett is throwing effectively. I think Jacoby Brissett's performance in the backup role for so many weeks in a row now certainly has to have the Arizona front office considering moving Kyler Murray in the offseason and maybe getting something back, because Brissett's showing that he can do the job just as well, if not better. There's not much thought into this, Ian, other than Bijan Robinson should have a big day. Atlanta's offense showed they could move the football last week, and Arizona games just continue to go over. The old saying comes into play here: if it ain't broke, don't fix it. Just bet Arizona games over until they give you a reason to stop.
Yep, it's exactly the way I see it. This is a good one at 4:00 on Sunday. Jacksonville and Denver, one of the better games on the slate. Denver 3-point favorites. The total here 46.5 in this game. Obviously, this game's in Denver, tough place to win. But I have zero. This is Jaguars or pass for me at +3. It is. I really like what I'm seeing out of the Jaguars. Can they win in Denver? We'll see. But I have no interest betting against Jacksonville. I like what I've seen. I think for Denver, well, I guess the Jaguars, they're coming off an easy game, obviously, against the lowly sad sack Jets last week. But Denver's coming off that huge game against Green Bay. A pretty physical game. Obviously they get to stay home, no travel. But still not the easiest to ramp yourself up again for a second straight week. Like what I'm seeing from Lawrence and the offense, like what I'm seeing. Even the defense has played pretty good of late, but they will be tested, because Bo Nix is just not fourth quarter Bo Nix anymore. He put together a complete game, in my opinion, start to finish against Green Bay. I think everyone's right to say that's one of the better four-quarter performances in a full game, start to finish, we've seen from Bo Nix as quarterback of the Denver Broncos last week. I think the betting markets kind of have it right here with this total. It's gone up a little bit. I don't hate it. 43 to 46.5 as far as this is concerned. Could it get to that, 27, 24 type of range? I think it's possible with these two teams. And certainly Jacksonville's defense, we have to remember one thing, too, about their unit. While it's played better lately, you face the Jets, who are terrible, the Colts, who obviously saw Daniel Jones get hurt, and Riley Leonard had to finish that game a couple weeks ago, and Tennessee before that. The last time there was some semblance of a solid offense was Arizona on the road, and they gave up 24, and that game went over the total. So I think I like the over here, but at +3, I like what I'm seeing out of the Jags and what Liam Cohen's brought. That laying a field goal or more against them is not something I want to do. Doesn't mean I'm going to be on Jacksonville, but I'm definitely not going to be against them here. Rob, what do you think for Jaguars Broncos?
Yeah, I would start with Bo Nix. I would say that in 2 years, that's the only complete game he's played against any good defense in 2 years. He's played them against poor defenses, but Green Bay is a good. And I get Micah Parsons got hurt in that game, but I think Denver had 245 yards worth of
Even
offense
before he got
prior.
hurt. Yes.
He got to him getting hurt, right? So we can't just pin it all on he did it without Parsons on the field. As you can look over my shoulder and you see a Broncos helmet, a Broncos. Obviously, I'm a Broncos fan, and I've been really, really critical of the Peyton play calling and the Knicks quarterbacking. But last week, I had to change my tune for 1 week. Whether or not it continues, we'll see. For what it's worth, Jacksonville's entire left side of the starting offensive line is questionable here. Doesn't mean they won't play, but you don't want that against the Denver pass rush. That's for sure. Trevor Lawrence could turn into old Trevor Lawrence under pressure against this team. But Denver's been attackable defensively 2 of the last 3 weeks. And we just talked about the overtime game against Washington, where they got over 400 yards worth of offense against Denver. And then last week, Green Bay moved the ball really well for a solid portion of that game until, the fade at the end from mid-fourth quarter on. So I don't know exactly where Denver's defense is at right now. This goes to your point about saying Liam Cohen and the way he's directing that offense. He has turned Trevor Lawrence into a better quarterback. I'd wait on Jacksonville to see if that left side of the offensive line is going to play, because I don't want to play into a strength of Denver there where they can come off that side and attack Lawrence. Ground game's been great for Jacksonville. I think that's been the difference here.
All right, there we go. Good stuff. All right, next up, it's Pittsburgh. We've only got 3 games left. We got Pittsburgh and Detroit. This is another one of the marquee games in the late window in the afternoon on Sunday, 4:25 Eastern. Detroit 6.5, 7-point favorites, 52 the total in this game. I'm going to be probably on the Lions here. I'm waiting to see the injury reports, firm themselves up closer to kickoff. But the one thing I will not do is Detroit off a loss. I will not be betting against them. This is pretty well known in the betting sphere that what the Lions have done off a straight up loss under head coach Dan Campbell. The results have been magnificent. They've been great off a loss. They're obviously coming off the Rams game where they lost on the road to LA, back home. Pittsburgh's also on a short week, Monday Night Football against Miami in the cold. Now you're playing on a short week. And I know Aaron Rodgers and the offense, it's 2 weeks in a row. All of a sudden, the Rodgers and Metcalf combination out of nowhere is starting to make some things happen. But, the one thing about Pittsburgh, too, is, being able to duplicate that on the road and put 2 good games in a row together is a question. There's still potentially no TJ Watt for this game for Pittsburgh either. I just do not bet against the Lions off a loss. That's how strong they've been in this situation. So it's Lions or pass for me. The total 52.5, and I've been on a lot of Detroit overs, including last week. I didn't even get scared off the 55. I said it's still going to, I think, can go over. We can get 31-28, and it flew over the total with that Rams-Lions game. 52. I think Detroit gets theirs. I almost feel like I would rather isolate Detroit team total over here in this game. I don't know I don't know, even against Brian Branch out, issues in the defense for Detroit in the secondary. I'm not willing to put all the stones in to the center of the ring here that Aaron Rodgers and the Steelers are going to be able to contribute enough to the total. So I think, the Lions team total over I like. I'll probably do some kind of Lions -7, Lions team total over. Bet365, Rob, has a double result bet of Detroit, like in that -110, -120 range, where you can take Detroit double result to lead at halftime and win the game. I have done that quite a bit with these moderate favorites, and this could be a good double result bet for the Detroit Lions, around that -110 to -120, lead at half, win the game. If both those things happen for Detroit, you cash your ticket. What do you think here, Steelers, Lions?
Well, I'm already involved, and I played over 28.5 Detroit team total for the reason that this Pittsburgh defense has been no good all season long. It just wasn't exploited on Monday night.
You don't think it's
You know,
turned around, shutting down Miami there?
you know, I can't. Sometimes our profession and what we do every day betting games, and sometimes it can be boiled down to its simplest form. And I just don't like the fact that you can come out as a handicapper and say, well, Tua doesn't win in 40-degree or less temperatures, and that's your reason, and that's your bet. But it won. They were miserable offensively, miserable against a bad defense without TJ Watt. This week, Detroit's going to absolutely rip through that defense because they have the players to do so. I feel like 28.5 is far too low. They'll get into the 30s here. For Pittsburgh, I too am with you in the fact that I think the full game should get over, but precautionary step here with Pittsburgh having 3/5 of the offensive line questionable at this time. And if they don't, one thing Aiden Hutchinson and company can do still is rush the passer. And Aaron Rodgers could be, and they've got enough experience with Aaron Rodgers, right? So I think that I can't trust the Pittsburgh side as much right now, but I did bet Detroit fairly heavily up and over 28.5 points.
Yeah, no argument here. And obviously they got to a whopping 44 the last time they were at home against the Dallas Cowboys a couple weeks ago. And yeah, Aiden Hutchinson, by the way, what an athletic, incredible interception. I know they lost the game, but that play he made on Matthew Stafford, the interception, and then the run back after that was absolutely incredible. Freak athlete, incredible talent. And it's been very impressive to see how he's played for that Detroit Lions team. What a difference he is healthy this year. All right, Las Vegas and Houston. Houston 14.5 point favorites, 38 the total here in this game. This is probably a pass for me, but I'll tell you what, it's a lot of points to be laying with Houston. But I was a bit worried about the spot for Houston last week. You know, when they were coming off a couple of big games and you're playing a lowly Arizona team, I was worried the focus may be waning a bit for the Texans because that was such a huge win against Kansas City on that Sunday night. And then you played Arizona last week, but they put the boots to them early and basically led by a wide margin, wire to wire. I think their defense kind of fell asleep at times, but they still led wire to wire Houston in that game. I just don't know if I saw enough from Las Vegas on the road last week to have any interest in backing them, even with 14 in my pocket. So pretty tough game. Probably one I'll leave alone. But Rob, any thoughts here? Raiders, Texans.
Yeah, it would be Houston or nothing. I talked earlier about having bet Seattle at plus 450 to win the NFC. Prior to the KC game, I bet Houston to win the AFC at plus 750, figuring with that defense. And CJ Stroud and company, Nico Collins, they've made some strides offensively. The offensive line still isn't great. It's been good enough. It'll be good enough against LA, which absolutely creates no pressure against any quarterback. So CJ Stroud, they've had like 3 games where they went over 400 yards, and generally they do it when they have either a really injured defense that they're facing or one that they could just manhandle. The Raiders fall into that one you can manhandle category. They're just not good. Max Crosby and 10 others. And then they're going to get after Geno Smith. Ashton Genty has not been able to find any holes whatsoever. I think he's got the least yardage before he gets hit of any back in the NFL so far. So it would be Houston or nothing in this game, simply because, again, 27-10 is not necessary. It doesn't sound like a blowout, but it gets you paid.
All right, we got our primetime games left. Sunday night, Monday night football. New England and Baltimore on Sunday night football. Baltimore 3-point favorites, 48 the total in this game. I thought last week was a good spot to bet against New England finally. That the streak would end, the bye week would disrupt rhythm, that finally we'd see a little bit of the weakness of the strength of schedule show up. Buffalo losing the first meeting against New England right now. It didn't start that way, obviously, because the Bills were putrid in the first half. Couldn't believe them. Couldn't believe the defense. Couldn't believe how the Henderson just ran the ball down their throat. But then halftime happened. And look, he's not Mr. Emotional. He's not Mr. Intensity, Sean McDermott. But whatever he said in the halftime, it worked. Because it was a totally different Buffalo team in the second half. And New England, a big lead evaporates and they lose. There is definitely an element to people I've talked about. There's people I know that love, and I respect, that love Baltimore here. And they say this is where the house of cards comes tumbling down on New England. A weak schedule, injuries on the D-line, including Milton Williams, that have allowed James Cook and others to run the football against them lately because their run defense numbers have gotten worse, much worse in recent weeks. Milton Williams' injury is a big part of that. You lose Will Campbell on the offensive line on that side of it. And Drake May with the ball in his hands to win a game, big game last week, and not able to get the job done. I understand all of those concerns, but I'll counter with this. Is Baltimore back after shutting down and shutting out Cincinnati last week? I still need to see more. I do, from the Baltimore Ravens. We've got a great coach in Vrabel. He's got some issues to work with injury-wise, but he's a great coach. He's off a loss. He's now getting 3 points. This number initially at Pick'em wasn't involved, moved up to 3. My spidey senses are tingling to the New England side now at anything at +3 or better. I get it. Strength of schedule, all that, and why New England's built up this tremendous record where they still have a chance to win their division and maybe be a number 1 seed in the AFC. I understand all of that and the injury situation. But I don't know if I'm there ready to say Baltimore's back based on last week. I need to see more. I need to see a lot more from this Baltimore team before I'm ready to lay 3. So it's a tricky game. Baltimore did get the run game going a bit last week, finally. Can that continue here? Because we know New England hasn't been as good stopping the run lately. The defense was great against Cincinnati, and they've still had moments where even though they've gotten healthier, they haven't always been strong, dominant on that side of the ball. So right now, with this game, I know I had the Bills-Patriots over last week, was one of my favorite overs. Kind of leaning that way again, although that Baltimore offense is still, and the red zone issues, man. There's still red zone issues with Baltimore, and we're talking 48. You're going to need the red zone to come through for you here and turn those 20 inside the 20 possessions into touchdowns more regularly than not if you're going to get over a total sitting in the 48 range like this. But right now, the game that I'm still mulling over, if I am betting something in this game, side or total, it would be Patriots. It would be over. We haven't gotten there yet, but it is a fascinating watch on Sunday Night Football to really gauge these two teams where they're at right now. Rob, what do you think for Sunday Night Football, Patriots-Ravens?
Yeah, I think in my mind, the safest play here was New England's team total over 23.5. It's like the unit that I can trust on the field is the New England offense. It's not the Baltimore offense. I don't play a lot of fantasy football, Ian. I'm in a league with my son runs a league. So Lamar Jackson's a quarterback on my team. And Lamar is not Lamar. That offense is not against Cincinnati to struggle to score 24 is not an indication that you're back. Let's put it that way. For New England on their side, now I wish I could lean into Baltimore's offense because you're right, the run defense on the New England side, and you get people saying, "Oh, their pass defense is getting better." Their pass defense has gotten better because people are running on them more. They're not really good in either area right now, but neither is Cincinnati, and Baltimore just wasn't impressive offensively against Cincinnati. So to me, listen, Baltimore has the second least amount of sacks in the NFL this year as a team. They're no longer a feared defense. Drake May's going to have time. Travion Henderson explodes for big plays multiple times this season. They've got ways to score. To me, it's the safest way to go. New England probably gets to 24. I don't know that they win the game or cover, et cetera, but I do think they're going to score 24 points against this defense, which still is not any good.
Yeah, I mean, and I thought I had concerns about the Ravens' defense. We got Rob here flat out saying they're not any good, and you're right. I think they've got a lot to prove. They haven't played. It's been a while since they played a really great offense, and I think this is going to be a proof of it. And I remember some of the other games they played earlier this year against great offenses. I remember a Monday Night Football game in Baltimore where Detroit and Jared Goff are just going to town on that Baltimore defense earlier this year. They were a little bit more banged up. I get it, but still, it's not like even with that better health they've had later in the season that they've come all the way back, in my opinion, on that side of the football. To me, they haven't. So there's still a lot to prove. All right, Monday Night Football, Rob, our last game, 49ers and Colts. 49ers, 5.5-point favorites, 46.5 the total. It's a great story. It's fun. It's cool to talk about Phillip Rivers, 44 years old, and the fact that, he battled it. He battled last week, short week, just got there, a couple practices. That's it. Hadn't played a game in 5 years. It's a fun story. The fact remains, I think, some elder people in my family could probably move a little bit faster in the pocket than he can right now at this stage of his career. And there is absolutely zero down the field vertical passing game and arm strength left in Phillip Rivers based on what I saw last week against Seattle. Everything was like a 5 to it was did he even throw once or twice beyond the stick? Seemed like everything was within a 5 to 10 yard radius throwing the football, or the majority of his passes there in that game. Maybe once or twice he'd get up into the 15 to 20 yard range, but certainly not much deeper than that, longer than that with his throws. And that's going to be a problem at some point. Will it be a problem here against San Francisco? Because you may need to score points here with the way the Niners offense getting healthier. Brock Purdy's feeling better. They got Jennings and Kittle and a lot of their weapons now back. Pearsall, McCaffrey stayed healthy. You've got all that to contend with. You're going to have to score points if you're going to win this game and or cover this number if you're Indianapolis, in my opinion. And there's still a lot to see because we know Rivers is going to get a second start here for Indianapolis. This is kind of one where I feel a little more comfortable in San Francisco's team total over in this game, where maybe if I were to bet this game, I haven't moved on it yet. I don't know if I want to lay 5.5. There's been some instances where the Niners laying these points on the road haven't always been capable of getting it done. Now, they did against Cleveland, but Cleveland was a mess. They put the ball on the ground, multiple turnovers. Special teams was terrible. Special teams coughed the ball up for Cleveland in that game, led San Francisco to have short fields. Right now, I'm leaning Niners team total over. It's really hard to decipher and expect the Colts offense to be dynamic, explosive. They need Jonathan Taylor working. They need the run game to help out and support Phillip Rivers here in this game. And that's going to be key. Will they be able to have some success here with that ground game to take some pressure off Phillip Rivers in this game here? That's the big question, and that, of course, remains to be seen. But like I said, the yards per play numbers were, I think, I've got it at 3.7 yards per play for Indianapolis last week on offense. So that's just extremely low, and that's a product of everything Rivers threw as far as his pass attempts was right near the line of scrimmage. There was no deep vertical game whatsoever. And that's eventually going to stunt you. You could try to win games, for a little bit, but that's just not the way long term to run your offense. And at some point, if it continues, this has been a great story. We're all having fun watching him come back, and try to make this comeback attempt in an emergency situation. But at some point, just for the fact of, and I'm not saying Riley Leonard's got a John Elway type of arm, he does not. But still, nevertheless, with Riley Leonard, you could probably get a little bit more depth on your throws with him under there. But they're in a tough spot. And they've obviously been scrambling ever since Daniel Jones went down to that season-ending injury. So tough spot for the Colts to be in. Right now, my lean here is Niners team total over. Rob, what do you think for Monday night?
Yeah, I think if you're the Colts, you have to play games now the way they played them against Seattle, which is low-scoring, defensive-oriented. Give the Colts defense a ton of credit holding Seattle to 6 field goals last week. I mean, they kept them in the game. Obviously, the game tape is out there now. Seattle only needed to see it for one half. The Indianapolis offense was quick rhythm passes. Don't get Phillip Rivers hurt. Now, his offensive line is elite. They negate a lot of the pressure, so I don't expect 49ers to get the Rivers, but what you can do is creep everybody up, let the 4-yard catch happen, and make the tackle. And, if Indy can go down the field that way, God bless them, but it will also run time off the clock. I think their defense, the combination of their defense and the way they looked against Seattle and their offense not being able to move in chunks unless Jonathan Taylor breaks loose in this game. 49ers defense has not been anything to write home about all season long, mostly due to injuries. Yep. And they gave up 24 to Tennessee last week. But to me, first off, Kyle Shanahan could be up for coach of the year for the job he's done with that team. It's amazing that they're in the position they're in. And they have been predicated on their offense, which is still explosive. It'll be the best unit on the field. But I think Colts' philosophy now has just shifted to defense, very, very methodical offense. And to me, it just adds up to under here at home. 46.5 looks like a lot of points. San Francisco, if they exceed their team total, it probably doesn't happen. But I don't know that the Colts are going to be any better than a 20-point team at this point in time anymore, Ian. So if you pencil them in for less than 20, you could still win both of those bets. I think under full game is the right way to go, though.
All right, leaning under here for Monday Night Football with this one. You're right, the Niners defense still, what's head-scratching, too, about the philosophy here for last week was in that game is with the, it was Indianapolis last week against Seattle, and I know Sam Darnold, you have some concerns with them at times, but they were depleted in the secondary. And yet, throughout much of that game, and Seattle escaped and won, so it's water under the bridge. They still won the game, but they were down multiple corners in the secondary, and yet they insisted on running the football constantly. Walker and Charbonnet in that game, and they struggled to get that run game going. And like at some point, don't you have to challenge that secondary that's depleted a little bit for the Indianapolis Colts? And Clint Kubiak just never did that for Seattle last week in the passing game. That puzzled me, Rob. That game plan, it puzzled me.
Well, you can mark it down in stone that Kyle Shanahan will challenge him. I mean, there's no question. Juwan Jennings, they might be without Ricky Pearsall, I think, in this game, but still, they've got the weaponry to do so. Kittle roams down the seams quite a bit. So, yeah, I mean, the offensive game plans by Kyle Shanahan have been brilliant all season long, whether it be Mac Jones, whether it be Brock Purdy, etc. And you always have the ultimate weapon, right? The two backs on the field. It's a great matchup, Jonathan Taylor and Christian McCaffrey.
No doubt, no doubt. You talk about efficient offenses. Rob and I ran an efficient offense here on this edition of the Football Frenzy Show. Are you kidding me? 90 minutes to get through the college football playoff and every NFL game on the board? That's efficiency right there. Great stuff, Rob. Always fun. We'll get you back on in January. But before we leave, as always, we end with a best bet. Can be anything you want, Rob. What do you got for the viewers for best bet?
Oh, goodness. Let's go to the NFL card. I have multiple choices here, but I'm going to stick with the Detroit Lions team total over 28.5, just because it's the largest bet I've made this week. We explained all the reasons why, Ian. I'm not going to go back into it, but I do think the Lions find the 30s in this game. Anything further that I have this week, and you can find it all over at wagertalk.com.
I think I'm going to go to that. And look, not the best number. I've got a better number in my pocket than what's out there here with this over for Sunday in the NFL, but I'm still going to go with it anyway. Atlanta, Arizona. We'll go over 47.5. I mean, Kirk Cousins and the Falcons are still moving the ball. They showed that against Tampa Bay last week. This Arizona defense has shown lots of quit. Not that great to begin with. But Jacoby Brissett, and look, they've had so many issues on the offensive side as far as injuries, but, they get the likes of a Michael Wilson and others at receiver now starting to step up. They have no run game, too. They cannot run the football, Arizona. They're a one-dimensional offense, and that's good for the over because they're going to be throwing a lot, and that means less time off the clock. So they're an automatic over to me. I don't see any reason for that to change here on Sunday, so I will go with Falcons, Cardinals, Battle of the Birds, over 47.5 for Sunday for my best bet. Rob, this has been great. Always fun. Anything you want to add before we wrap the show up?
Yeah, real quick, I'll just plug the website one more time, guys. Wagertalk.com for all information, whether it be video content or written content. You can find me over there twice a day on shows just like this. College basketball early in the morning, 10 a.m. to 11 a.m., their full court press show where I co-host with Adam Trigger. And then, of course, in the afternoon with friend and colleague of both of us, Ski Profit. I'm on Profit Picks with Ski, breaking down NBA, NFL for the most part each and every week, some college football. So once again, wagertalk.com.
Yeah, I don't tune. I get it. Obviously, I don't get a chance to tune in, but I am aware of Rob's shows that he does with Wager Time. Aware he does one with Ski because I do an NBA show later in the day with Ski. Later in the show every day. So that's good. And then, of course, he's got that show with Ski talking mostly NBA, maybe a little football. And, of course, you have that college basketball show that you do in the mornings throughout the week as well. So make sure you check that out, Rob Vino's content. Like I say, both of us, we're doing a million shows every day, it feels like. So hard to keep track of everything sometimes. But great stuff. We hope you enjoyed it. We gave you college football bowl games, the first round playoff games in college football, and NFL Week 16. Thanks to everyone for tuning in. Hit the like button if you haven't done so already. For Rob Vino, I'm Ian Cameron. Enjoy the games and good luck, whether it's college football, whether it's NFL Week 16. Cash some tickets this week. Good luck with your wagers. And we will see you again next week for another edition of Ian Cameron's Football Frenzy.